Okay, we have a few little Windows setup things that'll make our life a little bit easier. Down here at the bottom we have the taskbar. If I right click on the taskbar, I can see taskbar settings, and I can see several things. I like to leave search as search icon and label, check off the task view widgets and chat if they're on there, and then I scroll down, you see taskbar behaviors. I personally prefer my taskbar on the left, like the old Windows systems, but if you prefer center, of course, you can leave it there as well. There are several other things we can change here, but most of them are fairly simple. I'm going to grab out of that. If I want to pin something or unpin something from the taskbar, it's actually fairly simple. If it's already on the taskbar, I want to remove it, I can right click, like here on Get Bash, I can unpin that from the taskbar. And then if I want to add it back, if I find it under search, let's say Get Bash, for example, there I can say pin to taskbar, and it brings it right back. If I have an icon on my desktop, so I'm going to go to View here and show my desktop icons because I had them hidden. If I have it like this, so I can unpin Get Bash from the desktop, I can find it here on the desktop, and then I can go to, well, it's not on here, so I have to go to Show More Options and then Pin to Taskbar. It's that simple. If I want to pin one from the search, let's say I want to work with PowerShell, I could type in PowerShell, right? And then I could right click and pin to taskbar. If I want to work with a running program, I can do CMD and I can run command prompt, for example, and you see how it appears down here on the taskbar. I can right click on it when it's there and pin it to the taskbar when it's there. Simple enough. Next thing we want to look at is actually working with a few things in File Explorer. I'm going to click on File Explorer here, and I already have them set up on mine, but I do want to show them to you as well. We're going to click on View up here at the top and click Show. There are 3 checkboxes here that are very helpful to have checked. Item checkboxes, file name extensions, and hidden items. All 3 of those are really good to have checked because you can actually see everything going on in your file system. If you don't do file name extensions, Windows will hide those by default. So if I come here, we look at Desktop Documents, and I go to this directory, and I go to View, and go to Show, and turn off file name extensions, you'll see that it hides that from my files. Then if I go back to Show, and I click it on, it brings them back. Okay, so we definitely want to see those. That's going to make our life a lot easier. I also recommend you click the 3 little dots up here and you go to Options, and you'll get this little dialog box here. I change Open File Explorer to this PC because I think that's better than Home. And then I also like to turn off the Show Recently Used Files, Show Frequently Used Folders, Show Files from Office.com. I clear my File Explorer history, and then I apply. So it should look something like this whenever you're looking at it if you want to have the same settings as me. Other than that, it's fairly simple. If you can do your taskbar, you got your File Explorer going pretty well, most things will fall in line and look a lot better and easier to work with. Let's talk about files, folders, programs, and processes. The first thing we need to talk about is binary data. So any data that the computer is going to store, everything on the computer is going to be binary data. So this is any information that can be represented in 2 possible states. And we typically think of it as 1s and 0s because the transistors in the hardware of the computer can represent those as on and off. Okay. And then when we store our binary data, we're going to do it inside something called a file. So I'm going to open up my File Explorer program here on Windows. And I'm going to go down to my Documents folder where I have stored a couple of things. First of all, we have a file called file.txt, and then we also have something called a folder or directory. So files are collections of binary data, and they're going to store this data on a storage device. So when we look at this, they could be text, images, video, music, anything like that. In this case, we have a text file. If I double click on it, it will open it in the default program. In this case, the program is notepad.exe, and we'll see we have some text data inside of there. Now we're going to take a little deeper look at that in just a second, but we also need to understand folders. So folders or directories, they mean the same thing. Okay, they also have a different icon on here. Folders are designed to be containers. They are going to contain other folders, and they're going to contain files. So if I double click on that one, you will see a subfolder or subdirectory here, and then you will see some other files with some different extensions, then file.txt. Now, a file extension is going to be something that indicates the type of data that a file stores. So .java is going to store a Java file. .py is going to be a Python file, and these are two different programming languages. MD stands for Markdown. It's a special type of text file. So there are lots of different files with lots of different extensions, and one of the ways that we can identify files is by their extensions. And then, of course, folders are going to store other folders and files within them. If we take a little deeper look here at our file.txt file, I'm going to open this in another program called Visual Studio Code. And when I open this up, I'm going to be able to see, of course, this is just another fancy type of text editor program. It is allowing me to see the contents of that file. Now, essentially, all of this information right here has to be stored as binary data, and we can actually take a look at that with something called a hex editor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to split this to the bottom so we can see we have both. And then I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to open this with a hex editor program. When I do that, we should see here that we have hexadecimal values. If you don't know what hexadecimal is, I encourage you to look it up and learn a little bit about it, but it is a way of representing binary data in a shorter format. And then you can see over here on the right that I have the decoded text. So if I click on this 20 right here, I can see the binary for that. And then as I move to the right, you can see that the binary values will be changing. And as I keep going, you'll see as we get to the different values, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And basically all of these are all of the characters that are defined in a basic ASCII table. That's the American Standard Code for Information Interchange. And that shows us a mapping of all of these different characters to their binary values. And there's even one that's really interesting in here. You see 0D and then 0A. That is a carriage return in line feed, and it's what you may think of as hitting the enter key on your keyboard. When you hit the enter key, that tells the computer to move the cursor to the next line, and that's that 0D, 0A. That's a line feed and carriage return. And then everything else should be, hopefully, fairly obvious, a capital A, and then a capital B, so on and so forth. But here we can see the actual binary data of this file, and because it's text, it's fairly easy for us to understand. And most files, in fact, are actually going to end up being text files. So now we know a little bit about how to look at the inside of a text file. Let's also see what a program looks like. So if I go back over here to my folder and I look at main.py, main.py is a Python program file. I'm going to open up this whole folder here in Visual Studio Code. Go to File, Open Folder, and open up that whole folder there. Over here on the left, we'll be able to see our different files, and here I've written a very basic program. Essentially what this is going to do, this imports some other code to use. I'm going to ignore the Python extensions for now, and I'm creating something called a loop, and this loop is going to run several times, and each time it's going to print out down here whenever I run it. Now the reason I want to show you this is a program. When we're dealing with programs, it's essentially a collection of instruction statements that are designed to perform a specific task. In this case, the specific task I want is I want it to print out processes running for 100 times. So if I come down here and I execute that program, you'll see that it is now running. Now when a program is running, it's called a process, and I can actually show you where to find those processes on Windows. I'm going to come down here to the little Windows icon, right click, and find Task Manager. Now on the Task Manager, I should be able to find running processes. In fact, it says processes right here. Under Visual Studio Code, it is going to have several different processes. In fact, you'll see there it says main.py. But I'm going to look for Python right here. I'm going to type Python and hit enter, and you'll see that I have a Python process going on right now, and that's actually this program running. And you're going to watch, I'm going to right click on this and hit end task, and that process is going to stop. So whenever we have a program that is in the process of running, we call it a process. Now the last thing is we have special processes called services. Now these special processes or services, and we have a little tab for that in Task Manager. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to get rid of my Python filter here. You'll see all of the different services that are currently running on my computer. I have quite a few of them. One of the common ones, I'm going to type print here. One of the common ones that will be running is the print spooler program, and this has to do with how to print files, but you'll see that it is currently running under status. So this is a special process and again, a process is just a running program that is designed to sit there and essentially wait for when you want to print something. So we have files, we have folders, we have programs, and we have processes, and all of these things are going to work together to essentially make our computer work as we want it to. All right, operating system is a software system that's going to manage and control the hardware and the software resources that we have on a computer, or really any electronic device that operates like a computer, right? This is going to provide us a user interface that acts as a translator or intermediary between us and the applications we want to use and the hardware that's actually running everything down below. Let's talk about the Windows kernel. So a kernel is a central component of an operating system. It's designed to manage the system resources and hardware interactions. Think of it like this. A kernel sits between the system and the hardware and translates from the system to the hardware and from the hardware to the system. That is the job of the kernel. We're going to take a look at the Windows kernel file, but first we need to actually look at a component of the kernel, and that is known as the file system. Now what a file system is it's a component of the kernel that defines how the operating system is going to organize, store, and manage files on a storage device. And we can look at it using a program called File Explorer. So here I'm going to double click on File Explorer, and it's going to open up two of them for me actually because I double clicked. But on this one, we should see our File Explorer program open. I'm going to make sure I'm under this PC, and then I'm looking for local disk C. Now, C: indicates our storage device. So whether that's an SSD or an HDD or something like that, it's whatever the operating system is actually installed on that we're going to be seeing under C:. When I double click on that, it's going to take me to C:/, which is the root of the file system, and it is the folder that contains all other folders. And if you think of folders as branching out, then the base of those branches is going to be the roots, just like a tree, so we call this the root. Okay. Inside of this folder, we have the Windows folder. We'll double click on that. Windows, so C:/Windows, is where all of the operating system files are going to be found. This is everything we need for the operating system to run. Inside of that, we have System32, which is in another folder. And System32 is going to contain the Windows kernel. This is where that actual file is at. So over here in the search, I'm going to type NTOS_KRNL, right? And what you'll see is we have this NTOS_KRNL.exe file. That is the actual program file for the Windows kernel. Now, one of the long-standing jokes is if you delete System32, you know, this, that, the other, you may see on the internet. Deleting System32 is going to delete the kernel. If you delete the kernel, you may make Windows unusable, and so that's really dangerous. The other things that you'll actually delete are also the drivers. So here, if we move into the drivers folder, so here we're in Windows System32 drivers. Drivers are actually little modules or programs that are integrated into the kernel, and what they're for is to interact with new hardware. So if I plug in a new mouse to my computer, I need a driver file so that my computer can actually interact or talk with that mouse. Right? Now there are lots of different files in here for lots of different drivers and things like that. We're not going to get into the specifics, but we do need to understand this is where we can find our drivers. We will also find under Windows our system library files. So if I scroll down here and I go back to System32 and I look for DLLs. So I'm going to scroll down and see if we can find some DLL files. All of these DLL files, DLL stands for Dynamic Link Library, and that's a complicated name, but all it really means is we have pre-written code here. This is pre-written code designed to do a task, and these are our system libraries. So if somebody else wrote the code to do this stuff, we can use this code whenever we need to. Now, most of us are not going to be developers on the computer, but if developers need to do that, they can access this stuff too. A couple of cool things that we can do. If I need to interact with the drivers, I can come down here to my Windows Start. I can right-click on it and click the Device Manager. Whenever I click on this, this will actually open up all of the devices that are connected to our system and allow me to look at a couple things. Like if I click on Keyboard, for example, it says Standard PS2 Keyboard. I can right-click on that. It says Update Driver. Or I can click on Properties. and I can see driver details, try to update the driver, or I can uninstall the device. Lots of times, if you're having an issue with the keyboard and you can actually get to where you can uninstall it, you can uninstall it and restart, and Windows will automatically reinstall the driver as long as the keyboard is plugged in, and lots of times that will fix your problem. So there are lots of different things we can do with drivers. Drivers are really great because they allow us to plug and play with things, and they get downloaded and everything just kind of works until they don't, and then drivers are a pain. So drivers are one of the first things you actually want to check. We can also look at another way. Whoops, got to close that dialog box first. One of the other ways that we can do this is we can hit the Windows key and the R button, and we can type msinfo32. If we do that, we will get a summary of our system information. We can see hardware resources, and we can see components, and we can even look at things like, oh, there's our input, there's my keyboard, and I can actually see where the driver for that is located. So it's C:\Windows System32 drivers, and then this funky looking file right here. But we can see where the driver for that particular device is stored in the file system and go and find that. So again, that's been our kernel information. And we want to remember that the kernel is going to interact with the hardware between the system and the hardware. Next, we need to take a look at the shell. So on top of the kernel, we have a program called the shell, and this is going to provide an interface between the user and the operating system kernel. So we need something to translate between us and the kernel itself, and the kernel is going to translate between that and the hardware. So it's going to allow us to interact with the system by letting us enter commands, and it's going to allow that shell to interpret those commands, then pass it to the kernel so they can actually get executed eventually by the hardware, including the devices like our mouse and keyboards and the CPU and all that sort of stuff that we might deal with. All right, now we're going to take a look at the command line interface, or the command line way of interacting with the kernel. So if we go to File Explorer here, and of course local disk C, actually just click this drop down up here, and I'm going to type C:\Windows and then System32. Remember, we've looked at that before. And inside of System32, I'm going to search for cmd.exe. And this will find a program called cmd.exe inside of System32. This program is the command prompt program, and this is our command line way, which is literally just keyboard. Okay, it's our way of interacting with the kernel, and this is one of our shells that we can use in Windows. The other one that we can use that's actually a little bit more powerful than command prompt is called PowerShell. And PowerShell is going to be hidden a little deeper in System32. It's going to be under Windows PowerShell version 1.0, but you can see this PowerShell.exe file. This is another shell that we can use to interact with the kernel and execute programs and do things like that. Now, there are lots of different ways that we can get to these. Of course, I could just double-click on PowerShell.exe and it opens up for me, but this is usually not the way that we're going to go about getting there. We could go down here to the search bar and we could type CMD. This is for command prompt, and you'll see command prompt pop up, and we can open it and run it. You can also, if we want PowerShell, we can type PowerShell, and you'll see that it pops up. Another way you could do it is you could right click on the Windows and you can see terminal. You can click on terminal and it will open up a PowerShell for you as well. The way that I like to do it is I hit the Windows key and the R key, and it opens up a run dialog box, and I can type CMD and enter, and that will open up the command prompt. I can also hit the Windows key and R and type PowerShell and hit enter, and it will open up PowerShell for me. Now, these two different programs here, okay, they both are command lines. So you see whenever I click over here, I just have a place where I can type, and if I switch to the other one, I have a place where I can type as well. Now, they are going to be a little bit different in how they work, but essentially they are the same. Both of them are going to allow us to interact and do commands. If I switch to my command prompt here, I can type, who am I? And it tells me the user that I am. That's a very simple command. I can type CD, and I can move to C:\, Windows and System32. This is saying move where I currently am in the file system to this location. You'll see that my prompt there actually changed. I can type dir, and it will list all of the things that are inside of System32. So I have a way of interacting with the system. I can do the same thing over here in PowerShell. It has a little more complicated commands, but there are also some shortcuts to some other things. I could type ls, for example. That's a shortcut for listing all of the contents of the current folder or directory that I am in, and you can see here all the different things. I can also use cd just like I did. I can type clear, and that'll clear the screen. On CMD, I can type CLS. So there's lots of different commands that I can use here. I'm interacting with the system in a command line way. Now let's look at the graphical user interface. The graphical user interface is probably what you are used to. You see I have icons down here. I can point and click on things like open up File Explorer, and that allows me to interact with the file system. So when we look at this, this is really our shell that we have for interacting with the computer, but we're not doing it in a command line way. We are using graphical user interface. Right, that's what we're doing. So we're clicking on things, that's running programs. Those programs are interacting behind the scenes with the shell, with the kernel, right, in order to do something. Explorer.exe is this folder icon program right here. Great example of that. We also have our desktop. So if we close out of those, we have the desktop that we're used to looking at. On the side of the desktop, we have the taskbar. I can right click on here. Let's see, that's our taskbar settings. This is where our common programs are going to sit at. Then I might have the system tray. So the system tray is over here on the right. This is going to have some other common things, some certain processes that may be already available to us. It may show us things like our night light, whether or not we're connected to the internet, our sound. We can edit that as well. We have things like the notifications on the system tray as well. Then we also have the start menu. So if I click on the start icon here, this is our start menu. We have pinned items in the start menu that we can run off of there. And then we have settings. So if we go look through settings, these are all of our common settings that we can work through on Windows. And I can go to system and mess around with those as well. So this is going to be all of our interactions that we can go about whenever we're working with the graphical user interface side of the shell. Now our highest level component of our operating system is going to be the applications that we actually use. Now there may be applications on the command line, there may be applications on the graphical user interface or GUI, GUI if you prefer. But we can find those in several places, and there's also some ways that we can interact with those values. First of all, we can go to our File Explorer, and inside of our files here, we can actually go to local disk C, and inside of the root here, we will see program files and program files x86. Now, both of them are going to contain program files. Right now, the distinction between them is not super important, but I'm going to double click on program files, and you will see that we can find different programs in here, some of which have been installed. We've got like a folder for Google, Oracle, Python. Here's a great example. My Python application file, python.exe, is stored there. And so this is where we're going to find our program files. All of the applications, things that get installed, are going to have a place that they are installed on the computer. Most of them are going to be installed in program files or program files x86. Now they may also be stored, depending on how they've been installed, they may be installed for your user. So we can find that. If we go to users and then you find your username, you want to ignore default and public, find your username. In this case, mine is just user. Okay, double click on that, and then you will see lots of stuff here. Usually your installed things that are just for your user, you will see under app data. Now app data is typically a hidden folder, and you can click on view up here at the top and go to show and then click hidden items. You can find that. But we also have local low, local roaming, and we can click through that and you can see things like we've got Adobe, code is for VS Code in here, and we have Microsoft, SQL Developer, different things that I have installed there that may be installed for the user. There's also local low. Here's Microsoft stuff. Local, we've got some Brave software things. That's for the Brave. Down there, we've got Google, all kinds of things. So there are several different places where you can find things that have been installed, but they're always going to be applications that you're going to be using and working with. If we want to interact with some of those, we can actually come down here and search. We can type control panel, and control panel will allow us to do quite a few things, but control panel within itself is an application, but that application allows us to do things like come here and look at programs, and we can even do like uninstall a program, which is very useful. So I can find several of the different applications we have on here, like Google Chrome, Microsoft OneDrive, Firefox, Oracle Database, Python, all these different things, Brave, right? I could uninstall those programs using control panel. This is a very useful tool. It allows us to interact with a lot of the other things on the system. So we want to know where the control panel is. You can also use Task Manager. Task Manager is another application. I can right click on the Windows icon down here and find Task Manager. Task Manager is an application that allows us to work with the processes and services, things that are running on the system. We can look at things like how our performance is from our CPU memory, our hardware, essentially. We can look at that. But Task Manager is another application. We can also come down here to search. We can find settings and go to settings. Inside of settings, there is a apps. Okay, little button that we can click. We can look for installed apps. Now this is not necessarily going to show you everything depending on how you install things. We can see all of these applications as well. This is our highest level stuff that's going to provide us a specific interaction for a task or something we're going to do, like writing some notes with Notepad, reading the news, browsing the web with Mozilla Firefox, working on code with Visual Studio Code, movies and TV to watch movies and TV. These should be fairly self-explanatory. But the point here is these are all applications. These are going to be highest level things. These tend to be what we are interacting with as users on the system.